The sound of a gun being cocked echoed through the dusty streets of Brownsville, Texas, as Katherine Cooper stood her ground, her tear-stained face twisted with fury, despite the trembling of her hands. The year was 1878, and the unforgiving sun beat down on her slender shoulders as she faced the man who had shattered her world. "He stole my baby," she said, her voice breaking as she addressed the tall cowboy standing before her, his features shadowed by the wide brim of his hat. "My ex-husband took my Emma and disappeared into the hills. The law won't help me because he's the child's father, but he has no right at all." Isaac Galloway studied the desperate woman before him. At 32, he'd seen his share of tragedy across the western frontier, but something about her anguish cut through his usual reserve. Her copper hair had come loose from its pins, her green eyes wild with a mother's desperation. "Then I'll steal you back peace," he said finally, adjusting his gun belt. "I give you my word as a man who's never broken a promise. I'll help you find your daughter." Katherine clutched at his sleeve, searching his face for any sign of deception. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." "I know enough," Isaac replied, gently removing her hand from his arm. "I know what it's like to lose someone who matters. No child should be taken from their mother." The October wind swept dust down the main street as Katherine explained her situation. Her ex-husband, Victor Bailey, had appeared at her small homestead 3 days prior, while she was washing clothes outside. He'd been gone for over a year, abandoning them for the promise of gold in Colorado. When his ventures failed, he'd returned, drunk and angry, demanding his 3-year-old daughter. "He took her while I was fetching more water," Katherine said, her voice hollow with the memory. "By the time I returned, they were gone. I followed their tracks until they disappeared at the creek." The sheriff said without proof of danger to Emma, he couldn't intervene in what he called a family matter. Isaac nodded grimly. "The law's got limitations out here. Fortunately, I don't." They arranged to meet at dawn. Katherine returned to her small room above the general store where she worked, while Isaac headed to the saloon for information. Victor Bailey wasn't a subtle man, and men with drink in them spoke freely. Morning came swiftly, the Texas sky still scattered with stars when Katherine arrived at the livery stable. She wore practical riding clothes, her hair braided tightly against her head. Isaac was already there, saddling 2 horses. "Have you done this before?" she asked, taking the reins of a dappled mare. "Tracked people down." "I was a scout during the war," he said simply. "And after I rode with the Rangers for a time, tracking's in my blood." He paused, looking her over. "Can you ride, really ride, I mean? We might be covering rough country." Katherine swung herself into the saddle with practiced ease. "I grew up on a ranch outside Austin. I can ride." The hint of a smile touched Isaac's weathered face. "Good. We'll need to move fast. I learned last night that Bailey's heading for the border with a man named Rafferty. Seems your ex-husband owes money to some dangerous people in San Antonio. So he took Emma as, what, a shield?" The horror in Katherine's voice was palpable. "Or leverage," Isaac said grimly. "Either way, we need to catch them before they reach the Rio Grande." They rode hard through the morning, following the trail south toward the border. Isaac tracked with an expertise that both impressed and comforted Katherine. By midday, they stopped briefly to rest the horses near a small creek. While the animals drank, Katherine pulled out bread and dried beef from her saddlebags. "You said you know what it's like to lose someone," she ventured, offering him a portion. "If you don't mind my asking." Isaac accepted the food, staring at the horizon. "My wife and son. Fever took them both in '72. He was just 4. Katherine's hand instinctively reached for his, then stopped. "I'm sorry." "It was a long time ago." He met her eyes briefly. but I remember what it felt like. That's why I couldn't turn you away." They rode on through the afternoon, the landscape gradually changing from rolling hills to more rugged terrain. As twilight approached, Isaac pointed to smoke rising in the distance. "That'll be a camp," he said. "We'll approach carefully. Could be Bailey, could be someone else entirely." They tethered their horses in a sheltered ravine and proceeded on foot. The camp turned out to be 3 men drovers moving cattle. Isaac approached openly, his hands visible while Katherine hung back. "Evening, gentlemen," he called. "Mind if we share your fire? Been a long day's ride." The oldest of the men studied him suspiciously before nodding. "Help yourself, but we ain't got much to spare." "Just the warmth is welcome," Isaac said, gesturing for Katherine to join him. Over a simple meal of beans and coffee, Isaac casually inquired about other travelers they might have seen. "Fella with a young child," the youngest drover nodded. "Passed them yesterday, heading southwest. Man seemed in an awful hurry and the little girl was crying something fierce." Katherine's cup trembled in her hands. "How far ahead would you reckon?" Isaac asked. "Day's ride, maybe less." They had a wagon, but it was heavily loaded, moving slow over this terrain. They departed at first light, riding harder now that they knew they were on the right trail. Katherine's determination never wavered, even as the day grew hotter and the terrain more challenging. By mid-afternoon, Isaac reined in suddenly, signaling for silence. Ahead, the remains of a campsite smoldered. He dismounted, examining the ground carefully. "They left in a hurry maybe an hour ago," he said, crouching to study the tracks. 2 men, 1 child. "The wagon's wheel has a distinctive crack in it, easy to follow." Katherine slid from her saddle, scanning the campsite. Her heart stopped when she spotted a small cloth doll partially hidden under a stone. "Emma's," she whispered, clutching it to her chest. She wouldn't leave Penny behind willingly. Isaac's expression hardened. "They're heading for Mesa Canyon. It's rough country, but it cuts the journey to the border nearly in half." They pushed on, the terrain growing steadily more treacherous. As they approached the canyon, they dismounted again, leading their horses along a narrow trail that hugged the canyon wall. Below them, a dry riverbed wound through the stone. "There," Isaac whispered, pointing. In the shadows of the canyon floor, a wagon had pulled to a stop. 2 men argued beside it, their voices carrying faintly on the wind. Of Emma, there was no sign. "That's Victor," Katherine confirmed, her voice tight with anger. "And the other must be Rafferty." "We need to get closer," Isaac said. "The trail widens around that bend." "We'll leave the horses there and approach on foot." They secured the horses and crept forward, using the rocks and sparse vegetation for cover. As they drew nearer, Katherine could make out her ex-husband's angry gestures. "I told you she'd slow us down," Victor was shouting. "Now we've got half of Texas on our trail because she won't stop crying." "Keep your voice down," Rafferty hissed. "You're the one who insisted on bringing her, said she was insurance." "Where's Emma?" Katherine whispered, frantically scanning the area. "I don't see her." Isaac pointed to the wagon. "Probably inside." "We need to." A small figure suddenly bolted from the wagon, making a desperate dash for freedom. Emma, her blonde hair flying behind her, ran blindly toward the canyon wall. "Emma," Katherine cried, unable to contain herself. Everything happened at once. Victor and Rafferty spun toward the sound. Emma froze, then changed direction, running toward her mother's voice. Victor lunged for his gun. Isaac was faster. His first shot kicked up dust at Victor's feet, forcing him to dive for cover. "Katherine, get Emma!" he shouted, firing again to keep the men pinned down. Katherine scrambled down the slope, arms outstretched as Emma ran toward her. The little girl's face was dirty and tear-streaked, but her eyes shone with recognition. "Mama!" she cried. Katherine swept her daughter into her arms, turning to scramble back up the slope as bullets thudded into the dirt around them. Isaac provided covering fire, his expression grim with concentration. "Get to the horses," he called. Katherine ran, clutching Emma tightly against her chest. Behind her, the gunfire continued, sharp cracks echoing off the canyon walls. She reached the horses, swinging into her saddle with Emma held firmly before her. "Isaac," she called, fear gripping her heart as the shooting stopped. Had he been hit? Then he appeared, running in a low crouch along the trail. "Go," he shouted. "I'm right behind you." They rode hard, following the canyon rim for nearly a mile before finding a trail that led back down to the valley floor. Only when they'd put considerable distance between themselves and their pursuers did they slow their pace. "Are you hurt, little one?" Isaac asked, reaching across to touch Emma's cheek gently. The child shook her head, clinging to her mother. "I told Papa I wanted to go home, but he got angry." "You're safe now," Katherine murmured, kissing the top of her daughter's head. "We're going home." Isaac shook his head. "Not yet. They'll expect us to head back to Brownsville. We need somewhere safe to lie low until the trail cools." "I know a place," Katherine said. "My father had a hunting cabin about 20 miles east of here. It's isolated, well hidden." As night fell, they reached the cabin. It was small but sturdy, nestled in a grove of oak trees beside a spring-fed stream. Inside was dusty but intact: a table, chairs, a narrow bed, and a stone fireplace. While Isaac tended to the horses, Katherine cleaned Emma's face and hands, checking her for injuries. Apart from some scrapes and bruises, the child seemed physically unharmed, though her usual chatter was subdued. "Did Papa hurt you?" Katherine asked gently. Emma shook her head. "He was just mean. And scary. I don't like his friend. He has mean eyes." "You'll never have to see them again," Katherine promised, hugging her tightly. Isaac returned with their saddlebags and his rifle. "I've hidden the horses in the trees," he said. "No fire tonight. We can't risk the smoke being spotted." They ate a cold supper of jerky and biscuits. Emma fell asleep quickly, exhausted by her ordeal. Katherine tucked her into the bed, then joined Isaac by the window where he kept watch. "Thank you," she said softly. "I can never repay what you've done." "No need," he replied. "Get some rest. I'll take first watch. You've been tracking and fighting all day. You need sleep too." He glanced at her, something unreadable in his eyes. "I'm used to long days." "So am I," she insisted. "We'll take turns." He conceded with a nod, settling into a chair with his rifle across his knees. Katherine sat opposite him, drawing her shawl tighter against the night chill. "Why did you really help me?" she asked after a long silence. "The truth." Isaac studied her face in the moonlight filtering through the window. "When you approached me in town, you looked determined, like you'd walk through fire to get your child back. It reminded me of someone. Your wife," he nodded slowly. "Sarah was like that. Fierce when it came to protecting our boy." He paused. "And maybe I thought helping you might make up for not being able to save them." "I'm sorry," Katherine said again. "Don't be. We all carry our burdens." His eyes shifted to Emma's sleeping form. She seemed strong like her mother. Katherine smiled faintly. "She is too stubborn for her own good sometimes." "Wonder where she gets that from," Isaac said, the hint of a smile touching his lips. They talked through the night, taking turns watching. Katherine told him about her marriage, how Victor had seemed charming at first, then grew increasingly possessive and volatile after Emma's birth. How she'd finally gathered the courage to leave him after he struck her during one of his drunken rages. Isaac spoke of his time with the Rangers, of the justice and injustice he'd witnessed across the frontier, of how he'd drifted after losing his family, taking work where he could find it, never staying in one place long enough to form attachments. Dawn found them both exhausted but alert, their connection deepened by the night's confidences. Emma woke hungry and more animated, her resilient spirit beginning to recover. "We should stay here today," Isaac said, scanning the surrounding woods. "Give them time to move on. They'll expect us to head straight back to town." They spent the day in cautious seclusion. Isaac ventured out briefly to check for signs of pursuit, while Katherine cleaned the cabin and played quiet games with Emma. The domesticity of it struck Isaac when he returned the woman and child waiting, the cabin warmed by their presence. That evening, as Emma slept again, Katherine joined Isaac outside. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamond dust across the sky. "What will you do when we return?" he asked, his voice low. Katherine considered the question. "Keep working at the store, save enough to move somewhere Victor can't find us. San Francisco, maybe. California's a long way." "That's the appeal," she said with a sad smile. "Emma deserves a fresh start somewhere safe." Isaac nodded, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "It's good country out there. I passed through once years back. And you, what's next for Isaac Galloway?" he shrugged. "Haven't thought that far ahead, never do." "Maybe you should," she said softly. Their eyes met in the darkness, and for a moment, something sparked between them, possibility, fragile as a flame in the wind. The moment shattered at the sound of approaching horses. Isaac's hand went instantly to his gun as he pushed Katherine toward the cabin door. "Get inside. Take Emma and hide." Katherine gathered her sleeping daughter, retreating to a small storage space beneath the floorboards that her father had built years ago. With Emma clutched against her, she listened to the muffled sounds above boots on the porch, voices. "I know you're in there, Galloway." Victor's voice called. "Send out my wife and daughter and maybe I won't kill you." Isaac's voice came next, steady and controlled. "Your ex-wife and her daughter are under my protection, Bailey. You'd be wise to ride on." Laughter, then Rafferty's voice. "One man against three. Those ain't odds I'd bet on." "Three." Katherine's heart sank. They must have recruited another gun along the way. The first shot splintered the cabin window. Isaac returned fire, the exchange brief but intense. Then silence fell. "We can do this all night," Victor called, "or you can be reasonable." "I just want what's mine." "They were never yours," Isaac replied. "Not the way you treated them." More shots followed, punctuated by the crash of breaking glass and thudding bullets. Katherine pressed her hands over Emma's ears, whispering reassurances as her daughter began to wake and whimper in fear. Above, she heard a grunt of pain, then the sound of the back door opening. Footsteps circled the cabin. Another exchange of gunfire, then a cry of pain that wasn't Isaac's. "Rafferty's down," an unfamiliar voice shouted. "Kill that bastard," Victor roared. The gunfire intensified. Katherine closed her eyes, praying silently for Isaac's safety, for her daughter's future. Emma clung to her, trembling. Then came the sound of a body hitting the floor above them, followed by retreating footsteps and the thunder of horses galloping away. Silence descended, heavy with possibility. "Isaac," Katherine called softly, afraid to emerge. No answer. With shaking hands, she pushed open the trapdoor, lifting Emma out before climbing up herself. The cabin was in shambles, furniture overturned, windows shattered. Isaac lay motionless by the back door, blood staining his shirt. "No," she whispered, rushing to his side. "No, no, no." She pressed her hands to the wound in his shoulder, relief flooding her when his eyes flickered open. "Are they gone?" he asked hoarsely. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You're hurt." "Not as bad as it looks," he managed. "Got one of them. The other ran with Bailey." Katherine helped him to the bed, cutting away his shirt to examine the wound. The bullet had gone clean through his shoulder, missing anything vital. She cleaned and bandaged it with supplies from her saddlebag, while Emma brought water and watched with solemn eyes. "You're very brave," the little girl told Isaac seriously. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Not as brave as your mama." They spent 3 days at the cabin while Isaac recovered enough to travel. The forced confinement drew them closer, their shared danger and mutual trust building something neither had expected. On the third night, as Emma slept soundly, Katherine and Isaac sat outside beneath the stars. His arm was in a sling fashioned from one of her petticoats, but color had returned to his face. "We should be able to leave tomorrow," she said, her voice tinged with an emotion she couldn't name. "Yes," he agreed. "Best to get moving before Bailey brings back more men." Katherine studied his profile in the moonlight. "You've done more than I had any right to ask, risked your life for us." "Some things are worth risking everything for," he said simply. "What happens when we return to Brownsville?" Isaac was quiet for a long moment. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether you still plan to leave for California." Their eyes met, understanding passing between them without words. Katherine's hand found his, their fingers intertwining. "Some journeys are better not taken alone," she said softly. Isaac's hand tightened around hers. "Katherine Cooper, I've wandered most of my life, never found a reason to stay anywhere until now." "Is that a proposal, Mr. Galloway?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not yet," he said with a small smile, "but consider it a promise. Let me court you properly when we're safe." The journey back to Brownsville took 2 cautious days. They avoided the main trails, Isaac's vigilance never wavering despite his injury. When they finally reached town, the sheriff met them at the livery stable. "Bailey's dead," he announced without preamble. "Him and his partner got into a disagreement over in Del Rio. Shot each other in some saloon." Katherine felt nothing, neither joy nor sorrow at the news of her ex-husband's death. Only relief that the threat was gone, that Emma could grow up without that shadow looming over her. The weeks that followed brought healing for Isaac's shoulder, for Emma's nightmares, for Katherine's fear. Isaac took a job with the town's freight company, proving himself reliable and hardworking. Each evening, he called on Katherine and Emma at their small home behind the general store, bringing small gifts: a ribbon for Emma's hair, wildflowers for Katherine's table. The town watched their courtship with interest, but Katherine paid the gossip no mind. She saw only the way Isaac's eyes softened when Emma climbed onto his lap to hear stories, the gentleness in his calloused hands when they brushed against hers. On a crisp November evening, as they walked along the creek that bordered town, Isaac stopped beneath a cottonwood tree. "I've been thinking about California," he said. Katherine's heart stuttered. "Have you?" He nodded, taking her hands in his. "It's good country for a fresh start, for a family." "Is that what we are?" she asked, her voice catching. "A family we could be," he said, "if you'll have me." Katherine looked into his eyes, seeing the future reflected there, a home filled with laughter, children running in sunlit fields, a love built on respect and shared strength. "I will," she whispered. They married in December, a simple ceremony in Brownsville's small church. Emma stood proudly beside her mother, holding a bouquet of winter berries and evergreen. Spring found them on the trail west, their wagon loaded with the beginnings of a new life. Katherine sat beside Isaac on the driver's seat, Emma between them, pointing excitedly at each new wonder along the journey. At night, when Emma slept in the wagon, Katherine and Isaac would sit by the campfire, planning their future in whispered voices. "You regret it?" he asked one evening. "Leaving everything behind?" Katherine shook her head. "I'm not leaving anything behind. Everything that matters is right here." They reached California as summer bloomed, settling in a small valley north of San Francisco. Isaac used his savings to purchase land, good soil for farming, with a stream running clear and sweet along the northern boundary. Together, they built a home, board by board. Emma thrived in their new life, growing strong and confident under the California sun. She followed Isaac everywhere, learning to ride and fish and read the weather from cloud patterns. "She adores you," Katherine told him one evening as they watched Emma chase fireflies in the twilight. "The feeling is mutual," Isaac said, his arm around his wife's shoulders. "She reminds me of you, same determination, same heart." Katherine leaned against him, her hand resting on her growing belly. "I hope this one has your patience." Isaac's hand covered hers, feeling the movement of their unborn child. "Boy or girl, they'll have the best of both of us." Their son, Daniel, was born the following spring, a quiet baby with his father's thoughtful eyes and his mother's copper hair. Emma appointed herself his protector, telling anyone who would listen that he was her little brother and she had helped bring him home, just like Papa had helped bring her home. Years passed, their family and farm growing in tandem. 2 more children joined them: Sarah, named for Isaac's first wife, and Thomas, who arrived with the first snow of their 5th winter in California. On the 10th anniversary of their first meeting, Isaac presented Katherine with a small wooden box. Inside lay a locket, intricately engraved with their initials. "Open it," he urged. Inside was a tiny scrap of cloth, a piece of the doll Emma had dropped in that canyon so long ago. "You kept this?" Katherine asked, tears welling in her eyes. "It reminded me of the day my life changed," he said simply. "The day I found a reason to stop wandering." Katherine closed the locket, holding it against her heart. "You stole back more than peace for me, Isaac Galloway. You stole back my hope." "And you gave me a home," he replied, drawing her close. "Something I never thought I'd have again." From the porch of their California farmhouse, they could see their children playing in the golden afternoon light. Emma, now a young lady of 13, teaching little Thomas how to skip stones across the pond. Daniel and Sarah constructing an elaborate fort from fallen branches. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met that day?" Katherine asked. Isaac shook his head. "Some things are meant to be, no matter how unlikely. I was supposed to find you. Even with all the danger, all the risk, especially then," he said. "It was in that danger I saw your strength and you saw mine. We forged something unbreakable in that fire." As twilight deepened to dusk, they called the children in for supper. Around their table, laughter flowed freely, the bonds of their chosen family stronger than any blood ties could be. Later, as they stood together beneath a sky brilliant with stars, Isaac's arms encircled Katherine from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For trusting a stranger with your most precious treasure," he said. "For letting me love you both." Katherine turned in his arms, her face tilted up to his. "It wasn't hard to trust you. Even then, something in me knew you were the one who would bring us home." Their kiss was tender, a reaffirmation of promises kept and journeys shared. Above them, the California stars bore witness to a love born in desperation, but sustained by choice each day, a decision to build something lasting from the broken pieces of their past. The cowboy who had once pledged to steal back peace had given so much more: a family reborn, a love unexpected, and a home where shadows of the past could not reach. In the wild lands of a country still finding its way, they had forged their own destiny, writing their story not in the dust of Texas, but in the rich soil of their California farm, where 4 children and decades of love would grow from the most unlikely of beginnings.